Just want to share a few kind of closing thoughts, really. But what I want to do tonight is just to talk about one response to God, which I believe is the ultimate act of worship that we can give to God. But I just want to talk tonight about one response to Jesus, one response to the Father that I think is crucial. It's crucial if we are to see God move in our land, God move in our world, if we're to see the miracles that we long to see. And that is the ultimate act of worship, which is obedience. God calls us to respond to his love with obedience. I don't know if you've ever, have you ever come across, that book? It's the 5 Love Languages. It's done the rounds in the church all over the world, and there's the 5 love languages. There's touch, there's acts of kindness, there's gifts, there's affirmation, and there's something else. Have I got it right? Time, giving time. And you have various books. There's the 5 love languages for married people, the 5 love languages for engaged people, the 5 love languages for left-handed people, for blue-eyed people, and all of that. And they're all slightly varied on the theme. Well, it says in those books that there's 5 love languages. I'm afraid that I've discovered I have a 6th love language, and that is food. Tell me that you love me. That means nothing to me. Buy me a chicken shish kebab with chili sauce, and I know that you care. And I know that you care. Did you know that God has a love language, and his love language is obedience? Jesus said, if you love me, you will obey my commands. And he didn't say that, like an insecure girlfriend or boyfriend. If you really loved me, you'd get me this. He wasn't saying that. He was saying, this is how you show your love for me, by obeying my commands. This is how it works. And then he says again, just in those few verses, you are my friends if you do what I command you. Jesus is looking for friends. God is looking for friends in these days. And if I may say this, I believe God has many children today. Lots of children. But I don't think he's got many friends. And friends are those who choose to give back in obedience, to live lives of obedience. And it's obedience that unlocks, I believe, the door to the miraculous. Obedience unlocks the door for us to see answered prayers in our life. It's not that our obedience earns it. It's just that our obedience is the key. He loves us because he loves us because he loves us. But the way we love him back supremely is by obedience. And I just want to look at 2 quick scriptures and then we're going to pray. First is in John chapter 2, Jesus' first miracle. And it's when he changed water into wine at a wedding party. And I just want to read the first few verses of this. On the 3rd day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to Jesus, they have no more wine. Now, isn't that just like a mum? Isn't that just what a mum does? She doesn't tell you what she wants, does she? She doesn't say, can you bring the shopping in from the car? She says, there's a lot of shopping in the car. She doesn't say, can you load the dishwasher? She says, oh, the dishwasher needs loading. Jesus' mum was no different. She says to Jesus, they've run out of wine. And Jesus' response was, what's that got to do with me? Like any teenager. In fact, what he says is very interesting and it's very strong. He says, woman, Why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not yet come. Now, do you know some of the translators of the Bible, some of the translators of some of these versions, they felt bad that Jesus said woman like that, so they added the word dear woman. If you look at your Bible, in some translations it says dear woman. In the original, there's no dear. It's just woman. He's actually very strong, and most commentators, most theologians would say, at best, he was giving his mother a mild rebuke. What was going on there? I think this was the beginning of his ministry, and Jesus was saying, I'm going to from now on obey my Father in heaven above any other voice. Nothing and no one is going to get in the way of that. I'm going to be single-minded in obeying my Father. And then he says these very interesting words, my hour has not yet come. Now, do you know, when I first read that when I was 15, just after I became a Christian, I thought, that's a pretty good line. If it worked for Jesus, it might work for me. So I tried it. Next time my mum said, Michael, I want you to tidy your room. I looked her in the eye and I said, Mum, my hour has not yet come. It didn't work. But listen to how Mary responds. She doesn't say what you would expect her to say. His mother said to Jesus, don't talk like that to your mum. She didn't say that. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. And that's really what I want to say to you. Listen to Jesus' mum. She says to the servants, and she says to you, and she says to me, do whatever he tells you. Do whatever he tells you. And do you know the first thing that Jesus said after she said that? Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. Now, if I had been one of those servants, I'm pretty sure I would have said, excuse me, Mr. Christ, but why don't you listen to your mum for a little bit? Did you hear what she said? She said they've run out of wine. What we have is a wine shortage scenario. We do not have a water drought. There is loads of water. We don't need water. What we have is a Chateauneuf-du-Pape deficit. You need to do something with wine, not water. It didn't make sense. He said to the servants, fill these stone water jars with water. They did what he said. Probably because they had Mary's words ringing in their ears. Then he said, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. Draw some of the water out and take it to the guy in charge. And they could have thought, what are you talking about? This is dirty water, and he's expecting Chateauneuf-du-Pape. When he drinks dirty water out of the wine glass, we're going to get killed. They could have said, this doesn't make sense. No. But they did what Jesus told them. And they took it to the master of ceremonies. And then he said, this is the best wine I could possibly have tasted. You have left the best wine till last. A miracle happened. Where was the place of the miracle? It was in the place of obedience. A miracle happened when they obeyed Jesus. Miracles happen when we choose to obey Jesus. I just want to look at one other story. In Matthew chapter 14, Jesus has just fed 5,000 people with a little boy's picnic. And then there's a big crowd, and this is what we read in chapter 14, Jeremy, verse 22. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. Do you know, I've been reading this for over 40 years, this scripture. I didn't notice this until a few months ago. It actually says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. Do you know, in the original Greek, it's quite strong. It wasn't a gentle suggestion. So it was like Jesus said to the disciples, get in the boat. And Peter and John could well have said to Jesus, excuse me, Jesus, but we're fishermen. This is where we do our fishing, and we know the weather forecast, and there's going to be a storm tonight. We think we better leave in the morning. Get in the boat. He made them get in the boat, and he sent them out into the storm at night. Sometimes Jesus sends us into storms. Sometimes he sends us into storms. Why? Listen to this. Verse 24. And the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves, because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. Now, they were in the middle of a storm. The sea was rough. They would be scared. It was just before dawn, and it's the darkest time of night, just before dawn. And Jesus starts walking to them on the water. But because they're so full of fear, because they're so terrified, they think it's a ghost. They can't see him properly. They're afraid. How many times have we not seen Jesus because of our fears? Because our fears have blinded us to seeing where he is and who he is and when he comes to him. How many times have we mistaken Jesus for someone else because of our fears? What does Jesus do? Verse 27. But immediately Jesus said to them, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. He spoke to them. And you know the bit in the middle? It is I, it says in our translation. Do you know the original Greek? It's two words. It's eimi. I don't know original Greek. I don't know New Testament Greek, but I'm Greek, so I know a bit of Greek, and I know what that is. And that eimi literally means I am. So so they don't translate it, take courage, I am, don't be afraid, because that wouldn't make sense. So they take it that he means take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Did you know that there's 7 times in John's Gospel where not only Jesus says, I am the bread of life, I am the resurrection and the life, I am the good shepherd, I am the light of the world, I am the true vine, I am the gate for the sheep, and so on and so on. There's 7 of those I am sayings of Jesus, but there are also 7 times when Jesus says eimi, which means I am, and it's translated different times. It's like these 7 secret places. And in years earlier, when God spoke to Moses at the burning bush, Moses said to God, who shall I say you are? What shall I say your name is? And God says to Moses, tell them I am has sent you. I am who I am. Again, if it was in the Greek, it would be eimi, I am. Do you know another time in John's Gospel? I love this one, where Jesus says I am, is when the soldiers come to arrest Jesus, to take him to the cross. And they come and they say, where's... And then Jesus says to them, who are you looking for? And they say, Jesus of Nazareth. And our translation says, he says, I am he. And they fall to the ground. What he actually says is, eimi. He says, who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I am. And they all keel over. A whole bunch of soldiers. Why? Because I am is the name that God gives himself. Jesus says, I am, I am, I am. And they fall over, and he waits for them to get up. So he helps them arrest him, because he knows why he's going to the cross.